You feel pain like no other pain, and you know that in your life it's going to be very difficult to...
Prince William believed he was opening a sealed account of ordinary palace spending. Instead, the first page exposed a private financial structure reaching into royal residences, charitable budgets, household appointments, and confidential reserve funds. His expression hardened as one name appeared beside authorization after authorization: Camilla. By the time he reached the final entry, the future king understood that this was not merely about money. It was about control. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The summons brought William into a records room at Windsor. A comptroller placed 3 sealed folders before him, explaining that a comptroller supervises royal household finances. A confidentiality order, an instruction preventing disclosure, had kept these records closed to everyone except the sovereign and his direct heir, the next person entitled to inherit the crown. William opened the first folder, expecting routine accounts. What he found was explosive. The sealed royal financial records showed that Camilla had received approval rights over household budgets, private reserve transfers, staffing funds, and spending linked to residences. She had not merely offered advice. Her office could delay requests, redirect proposals, and decide which expenses reached Charles. The prince read one authorization page twice. His fingers tightened as decisions appeared under unfamiliar codes. For years, Charles had presented those choices as settled matters. Now his son faced the possibility that the queen consort had filtered them first, shaping what the king saw and what remained hidden. William had been trained to carry the monarchy's future, yet someone had denied him knowledge of the machinery beneath his feet. Then one entry changed the room. Repeated transfers marked special household continuity, led nowhere visible. Their destination sat behind an administrative code connected to Camilla's senior aide. The comptroller admitted that ordinary accounting staff could not open it. William looked up sharply, but the official had no answer capable of easing the shock. A handwritten instruction made the discovery darker. It ordered that the arrangement survive any change in sovereign authority, meaning it was designed to continue if responsibility passed from Charles to William. The future king set the page down and stared across the table. This was no temporary convenience. It appeared built to outlast the man who had approved it. William reached the final folder before leaving. Inside waited a sealed appendix bearing Charles's signature, dated before the widest powers had been added. The king may have approved the beginning without understanding the ending. William had uncovered Camilla's hidden financial reach, but the deeper wound would come from learning what Charles knew and why he had never warned his son. The records did more than connect Camilla to palace money. They placed 3 people inside a painful triangle of trust. William saw secrecy where he had expected duty. Charles faced the possibility that loyalty had made him dangerously unquestioning. And behind a closed door, Camilla realized the protections she had spent years building could now be interpreted as a quiet campaign for power. Every signature suddenly carried an emotional cost. William had spent years preparing to inherit responsibility, not merely a title. The crown's private estates, the properties and financial interests managed for royal use, required careful oversight because one hidden payment could damage public trust. The royal household structure, meaning the staff and offices supporting the monarch's duties, mattered for the same reason. If money silently shaped appointments, it could also shape whose advice reached the throne. Camilla's influence had grown after Charles became king. Her office gradually became involved in staffing, schedules, residence maintenance, charitable hospitality, and private household spending. Each new responsibility had appeared practical on its own. Together, however, they created a path through which the queen consort could influence decisions long before they arrived before the monarch. William entered his study and found Catherine waiting. He placed the folder on his desk, but could not speak. The Princess of Wales watched anger fade from his face, leaving something more painful behind. He finally admitted that he no longer knew which assurances had truly come from his father, and which had first passed through Camilla's office. Catherine moved closer, but the prince kept staring at the closed file, as though it might still contain a less devastating answer. Charles received the warning minutes later. A brief message informed him that the sealed archive, a protected collection of confidential records, had been opened by his son. The king removed his glasses, folded the note once, then again, and remained motionless. Defending his wife could deepen William's sense of betrayal. Confronting her could destroy the trust on which his marriage depended. Camilla learned the truth while preparing for an engagement. She dismissed her dresser, closed the door, and gripped the back of a chair. The Queen understood exactly what William had found. Those pages did not merely permit her to recommend spending. They allowed her office to delay payments, redirect proposals, and determine which requests reached Charles. Her influence had become power, whether she admitted it or not. William finally opened the folder again. Catherine asked the question he had been avoiding. When did this begin? The answer waited inside a dated memorandum linked to a winter reception, when Charles had been exhausted and Camilla had made one quiet request. To understand how her influence became embedded so deeply, the prince would have to return to the evening that permanently altered the palace's balance. Every palace crisis has a moment that seemed harmless when it happened. In this story, it came after a winter reception, when the music had stopped and the guests had gone. Charles was tired, Camilla was waiting, and a disputed household payment sat unsigned on his desk. What followed was a private conversation, a hastily approved memorandum, and a transfer of authority that no one imagined William would one day uncover. Charles had entered the first demanding months of his reign, surrounded by competing offices. Requests moved between departments, household expenses remained unpaid, and routine decisions repeatedly returned to his desk. That disorder mattered, because delayed maintenance could weaken palace security, while blocked charitable spending could damage commitments made in the monarch's name. The king wanted control, but each new folder left him feeling further behind. Camilla recognized his frustration and offered a simple answer. Her office could screen routine requests, remove duplicated paperwork, and send only urgent decisions to Charles. The queen consort described the change as protection, not power. She argued that fewer documents would give her husband more time to lead. Yet beneath that promise waited a dangerous question. Who would decide what the monarch was allowed to see? The December reception became the point of no return. Charles returned exhausted and found Camilla beside his desk with an unpaid security renovation request. The work involved changes meant to protect a royal residence, yet officials had allowed the payment to stall between departments. She warned that administrative disorder made them both vulnerable. He listened because the risk felt immediate, and because he trusted her. Charles reached for his pen. Camilla placed a temporary memorandum before him, a written instruction granting her office preliminary authority over selected household expenses. The king believed the arrangement would last 90 days and clear the backlog. He signed without asking how broadly the words "selected expenditures" might later be interpreted. In that quiet instant, convenience opened the door to control. The arrangement did not expire. Camilla's office renewed it repeatedly, and each version widened the language. Staffing funds entered the system, followed by residence costs and private transfers. William received only short notices, saying procedures were being streamlined, meaning simplified for efficiency. The prince had no reason to suspect that simplification was steadily removing him from the chain of knowledge. A former treasurer finally objected during a private meeting. His preserved written account recorded his warning that the Queen's screening authority could become a permanent financial gate. Days later, the official was reassigned, but his documented statement survived inside the sealed records. William now read its final sentence twice. The treasurer had written that Camilla personally demanded the prince remain outside the system. Armed with proof that his exclusion had been discussed deliberately, William could no longer remain silent. The next door he opened would place him face to face with the queen consort. William did not arrive shouting. That made the encounter far more dangerous. He entered the private sitting room carrying a single copied page, closed the door behind him, and waited until Camilla looked directly at him. There were no aides, no secretaries, and no ceremonial courtesies to soften what came next. He laid the paper between them and asked the question that shattered the remaining calm. Why was I kept outside? Camilla had expected an argument about individual payments. She had prepared explanations for maintenance costs, staffing decisions, and charitable commitments. The queen consort had not prepared to defend the entire structure of her authority, or the handwritten amendment ordering William's exclusion. That instruction mattered because the prince was the direct heir, the person next in line to inherit the throne and its responsibilities. William pushed the copied page across the table. Camilla read the amendment without touching it. The prince waited, refusing to rescue her from the silence. He had chosen to confront her before speaking with Charles, because the words had originated from her office. He wanted an answer untouched by advisors, carefully prepared statements, or his father's instinct to protect his wife. Camilla finally insisted that the arrangement had protected the king from competing centers of command. She argued that William's growing office had begun questioning decisions before Charles could settle them. In her private account of the dispute, delivered directly across that table, the Queen said two powerful offices could not fight for influence while the monarch was still establishing his reign. Someone had needed to control the flow. William's restraint nearly broke. He told Camilla that protecting Charles did not require deceiving his son. The future king had defended household decisions because he believed they represented his father's judgment. Now he knew that financial briefings, private summaries explaining important spending choices, had been delayed or blocked before reaching him. His voice cracked as he admitted he had supported decisions he never fully understood. Camilla did not deny it. She acknowledged during that private conversation that she had stopped several briefings because William's team appeared to be behaving as though the next reign had already begun. The Queen believed she was defending her husband's authority. The prince heard something darker. Fear of his future had been used to limit his present. Then Camilla delivered the deeper blow. Charles knew his son was not receiving every document. The king may not have understood how many requests were being filtered, redirected, or buried, but he had accepted the basic exclusion. William stepped back from the table. Betrayal now had two faces. Camilla issued one final warning as he reached the door. Removing her authority would freeze salaries, disrupt residences, and place charitable commitments at risk within days. William left without answering. The confrontation had exposed the betrayal, but it also revealed a dangerous reality. Her influence had become so deeply wired into palace life that breaking it could wound the monarchy itself. Palace power does not always arrive with a crown, a proclamation, or a public command. Sometimes it lives inside routing codes, approval chains, and the quiet right to decide which document reaches a desk. William had confronted Camilla as a wounded son. Now he had to examine her authority as a future sovereign, and the results were even more disturbing. Her grip survived because dozens of ordinary decisions depended upon it. William entered the financial briefing beside Charles, carrying the copied instruction that had changed everything. A controller began by explaining that Camilla did not personally own the royal funds. Her power came through administrative access, the ability to review proposals, delay approvals, prioritize payments, and shape which requests reached the king. That distinction mattered. Ownership could be challenged openly, but hidden influence was harder to see and far easier to deny. Charles listened as the controller described how the system had evolved. Palace employees discovered that requests supported by the Queen's office moved quickly, while unsupported proposals remained unanswered. Her preference slowly became as powerful as a written command. Staff members stopped asking whether Camilla held formal authority. They simply learned that gaining her approval was the safest way to protect salaries, projects, and careers. The first chart silenced the room. It showed how many major approvals had bypassed William's office during the previous year. The prince watched his father lower his eyes and slowly remove his signet ring, the personal ring traditionally associated with royal identity and authority. Charles turned it between his fingers, as though its weight had suddenly changed. He had trusted his wife to reduce pressure. Instead, that trust had allowed another system to grow beneath his own. William chose his words carefully. He had no desire to humiliate Charles, especially before palace officials, but restraint could not hide his pain. The future king asked why nobody had warned him that Camilla's office was deciding what he could see. His father offered no immediate answer. The silence confirmed that affection had weakened the scrutiny the monarchy required. Then the controller opened the documented financial review. A contingency fund, money reserved for urgent or unexpected needs, had financed several staff appointments linked to the Queen's office. Those employees later joined the approval chain, controlling access to further funds. The arrangement had strengthened itself. Money created loyalty, and loyalty protected control. A locked appendix carried the darkest provision. Camilla's authority was designed to continue during Charles's illness, travel, or temporary incapacity, precisely when he would be least able to supervise it. The king finally looked at William and accepted that the structure must be suspended immediately. Yet suspension carried its own danger. Payments could freeze, staff could panic, and charities could lose promised support. Charles had spent years avoiding a choice between wife and heir. Now one emergency order waited for his signature, and avoidance was no longer possible. The pen hovered for only a second, yet everyone in the room understood what the signature would destroy. Charles was not merely revising an accounting procedure. He was withdrawing private authority from his wife and acknowledging that William's fears were justified. When the king finally signed, the comptroller collected the order without celebration. Across the palace, locked accounts reopened, approval chains collapsed, and Camilla learned that her hidden command had ended. Charles had signed an emergency directive, a formal instruction created to take effect without delay during a serious crisis. It suspended every independent financial approval power attached to the Queen's office. Temporary oversight passed to a joint panel, a small group required to report to both the sovereign and the heir. That safeguard mattered because neither husband nor son could now control the review alone. William watched the comptroller secure the order. Staff members received immediate instructions to preserve emails, handwritten notes, expenditure logs, and appointment records. Nothing could be altered or quietly removed. The prince understood why speed mattered. Missing evidence could hide the true size of Camilla's influence, while delayed payments could punish innocent workers who knew nothing about the secret arrangement. Camilla received her copy in the private sitting room. She read the final paragraph, removed her glasses, and asked her secretary to leave. The Queen remained still until the door closed. Then she crushed the accompanying envelope in one hand. The order stripped away more than authority. It destroyed the private system she had defended as necessary to protect Charles. Her humiliation deepened when she learned how the decision had been made. Charles had signed in William's presence, while 4 officials watched. To Camilla, that detail transformed an administrative correction into a husband choosing his son. The king had not warned her first, and the prince had witnessed the exact moment her control ended. That wound cut deeper than any lost signature power. The consequences arrived immediately. 2 senior appointments were frozen, a residence renovation payment was halted, and several charitable commitments required fresh approval. Employees began calling different offices for answers. Camilla's warning had been correct. Removing her authority without replacing every connection created confusion across the household. Then one suspended transfer changed William's judgment. A documented spending note showed that the money supported former household employees facing illness and financial hardship. It was not intended for luxury or personal reward. Charles had approved the program verbally, but Camilla had hidden its funding route to protect the recipient's privacy. William felt certainty slip away. The Queen's methods remained secretive and unacceptable, yet not every decision had been selfish. Exposing control was easy. Judging motive was far harder. Before any final punishment, the prince requested a meeting with his father alone. The machinery had stopped, but the deepest reckoning could not happen in a committee room. Father and son now had to confront what silence had cost them. With the officials dismissed and the folders closed, Charles and William were finally left alone. There was no institution between them now, only a father who had trusted too easily and a son who felt prepared for duty but excluded from truth. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then the king admitted the failure William had needed him to name. He had allowed personal loyalty to replace scrutiny, and the crown had paid the price. William had requested the private meeting before deciding how completely Camilla's financial system should be dismantled. The crown, in this context, meant the monarchy as an institution, rather than simply the object worn at a coronation. The prince needed his father's personal account because removing every disputed arrangement could harm employees, residences, and charitable programs that depended upon stable funding. Charles began without defending himself. He explained that Camilla's involvement had first seemed like practical support during an exhausting transition. Documents arrived faster than he could read them. Departments competed for attention, and delayed security work created real risks. The king had never believed his wife was building a separate center of power. He had believed she was helping him survive the pressure. Charles then admitted why accepting the failure hurt so deeply. Condemning the arrangement felt like betraying the woman who had stood beside him through years of hostility and public judgment. Camilla had protected him when his confidence weakened. Now he feared that acknowledging her mistake would make every act of loyalty between them appear false. William refused to let emotion erase responsibility. He told his father that concealing the truth would betray the institution they both served. The future king then confessed that his anger came partly from fear. One day, he could inherit a monarchy whose most important decisions had been hidden from him. Charles reached across the table, but stopped before touching his son's hand. The silence finally broke another secret. During their private conversation, Charles revealed that Camilla had repeatedly warned him William was moving too quickly toward authority. She had suggested that the prince's office was preparing for the next reign before the current one had found stability. The king now recognized that those warnings had shaped his distance from his heir. Trust in his wife had quietly become suspicion of his son. William did not demand revenge. Together, father and son drafted the foundation of a permanent settlement. No spouse of a sovereign or heir, the reigning monarch or the person next in line, would independently control financial access. Every major private expenditure would leave a record that authorized reviewers could examine. Their agreement began repairing the breach between them, but it could not contain the approaching storm. Someone beyond the room already knew the records had been opened. By morning, the crisis would dominate broadcasts and gather crowds near the palace gates. Inside Windsor, father and son had chosen transparency. Outside, the country was preparing to judge them. By sunrise, a private palace reckoning had become a national spectacle. The argument was no longer confined to ledgers or locked rooms. It appeared on breakfast broadcasts, newspaper stands, and phones held outside Buckingham Palace. Some saw William as the heir who had defended accountability. Others saw Camilla as a convenient target for a system Charles had approved. Then one front page reduced the entire crisis to 4 words, and the crowd fell silent. The palace responded with a carefully worded statement. It confirmed that internal financial authorities had been reorganized after a review found oversight procedures inconsistent with present standards. Oversight procedures are the checks used to ensure money is approved, recorded, and reviewed properly. The statement avoided personal blame, but its meaning was unmistakable. The old system had failed. Broadcasters drew an important distinction. Camilla had not been accused of owning crown money, meaning funds connected to the monarchy's official and private operations. The controversy centered on administrative control. Her office had possessed the power to delay requests, favor certain payments, and influence which financial decisions reached Charles. She may not have held the purse, but she had helped decide when it opened. Catherine watched the coverage beside William. When one commentator described the prince as shattered, she saw him recoil. The princess asked whether the word felt unfair. He admitted that it was accurate, but not for the reason the public assumed. His deepest wound was not Camilla's hidden authority. It was learning that his father had accepted his exclusion and never explained why. Camilla sat alone with the television muted. The Queen watched presenters debate whether she could ever regain public trust. When one asked if her influence had crossed into manipulation, she switched off the screen but remained facing it. Silence offered no protection now. The entire country was discussing decisions once hidden behind palace doors. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace captured the national mood. A newspaper vendor raised a front page above his head, bearing 4 words: Hidden Hand, Royal Purse. Conversations stopped as cameras turned toward him. Some people shook their heads. Others defended Camilla, arguing that Charles had signed the original authority. For one tense moment, anger and uncertainty stood together at the palace gates. Then public judgment began to shift. A documented summary released by the palace confirmed that one disputed fund had supported vulnerable former household employees facing illness and financial hardship. The discovery did not excuse Camilla's secrecy, but it complicated her motive. Control had served her influence, yet some of that influence had also protected people easily forgotten. Charles understood that outrage was giving way to a harder demand: fairness. The king began preparing a final family decision that would define his wife's place and confirm his son's authority. The public had delivered its judgment, but the monarchy still owed something stronger than a headline: a verdict carrying responsibility, consequence, and mercy. The crisis ended without exile, revenge, or a theatrical removal. It ended with something harder: an admission of failure and a permanent surrender of hidden power. Charles gathered William and Camilla in the same room where their trust had fractured. On the table lay a new financial charter, stripped of secret channels and personal discretion. Each of them understood that signing it would not erase the damage, but it would decide what the monarchy became afterward. Charles opened the documented final review and accepted its findings without qualification. The financial charter, a binding set of rules governing how royal money would be approved and examined, rested beside him. Investigators had concluded that Camilla used authority created through valid royal approvals, yet allowed that power to expand beyond proper limits and remain hidden from necessary scrutiny. The king refused to make his wife the sole scapegoat. He admitted that he had signed broad instructions without creating independent safeguards, meaning checks that no single person could secretly control. His trust had opened the door. Her fear had pushed it wider. Charles accepted that love could explain his failure, but it could never excuse it. Camilla turned toward William and finally spoke without defending the system. During that private meeting, the Queen admitted she had believed his growing influence threatened Charles's confidence. She feared the future king's expanding office would make her husband appear weak before his reign had found stability. That fear led her to exclude the prince, and exclusion slowly became control. William listened, but he did not offer instant forgiveness. He told Camilla that trust could not be repaired by one apology. It had to be rebuilt through conduct. The prince then watched his father sign the charter first. He added his own name beneath Charles's. The queen paused, removed the ring from her writing hand and signed last. The settlement ended independent financial authority for royal spouses. It created dual oversight, meaning important spending required review from more than one responsible office. It also restored William's access to major records and ordered scheduled audits of private household funds. No hidden approval chain could survive beyond the person who created it. Camilla retained her public position, but her private administrative network disappeared. Charles remained beside her, while openly accepting his share of the blame. William gained real authority without using the scandal to humiliate either of them. Accountability arrived without revenge, and mercy arrived without pretending the betrayal had never happened. William left the room wounded, but no longer powerless. His heartbreak had forced the family to choose transparency over comfort and duty over private loyalty. Camilla learned that influence without accountability becomes control. Charles learned that devotion cannot replace oversight. The prince learned that preparing to reign sometimes means confronting those he most wants to trust. The sealed records began as evidence of division, but their final legacy was clear. The crown could survive painful truth only when those closest to it stopped hiding behind silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.